Okay, you should have downloaded the Lab 2 starter images, and so if we open it, let me drag it over here. You can see that what we have is 4 images, and we're just going to work with these in this animation. We have a background image, a photo, 1, photo 2, and photo 3. All of look like there's something that's part of a beachfront boardwalk. So you want to have those handy. If you haven't downloaded them, stop the video and go ahead and download them. And so we're still working with the same animate file we saved as demo1 FLA, and I've scaled it down to 85% so it fits nicely within the stage, and I have some room here for the overflow. Now by default the first layer is called layer 1, so what we'll do is let's go ahead and we're going to rename this thing background, because what we want to do is we want to put that background image on it, and so we'll just go ahead and name it background. And what I'd like to do is we're going to get those pictures in here, and so I'm going to do something a little different than what you see in the book. Let's start working with a library right now, because that's really important. And I want to do something a little different. Let's work with the library, which is over here. Right now we don't have anything in the library. This shows us our library, and if we had assets in the library, then we could we would see them listed here. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to actually import all those pictures. So let's select File on the menu bar and Import to the library, and then we're going to go to that folder, which is right here, and let's go ahead and we'll import the background. So we'll go ahead and select import, and so we'll import the background. Doesn't import it to the stage, imports it to the library. And so you can see if we click on it, we get a preview of that item in the library, and it's just a simple image, bitmap or raster image in the library itself. And so let's import the rest of those images to the library. We'll go back to the library, to File, and then Import to the library. And right now it's only showing us PNG, so let's see all files. And then we're going to select all 4 of these images, and then click Open. And now we can see them: JPEG photo 1, photo 2, photo 3, photo 4. And so let's go ahead and let's place these photos on the stage. So for the background, let's go to the library and let's find the background PNG, and we're just going to drag it and then drop it on the stage. Now notice that when we did that, something changed about the timeline. Okay, let me undo so you can see it again. Right now we've got a placeholder. If I click here, you can see there's an open donut. Before we just had a blank frame. Here, because I dragged it back out, we have a blank keyframe. So if we go to the library and I bring that background image back in and I drop it, there we can see we got that frame with a blue background and the black dot. That means that it is a keyframe, and so it's the first frame on the background layer. Right now this thing isn't positioned. We can go ahead and position it the way we want, what have you. We can do things like here with the tools. We can take it and we can scale it so that it fits to the stage approximately, and it's okay if We don't need to drag it out so the wood is out to the edges. That feathering is actually what we want. And so this is the background, and it's on the first keyframe on the background layer. Now what we want to do is bring in the rest of these elements as well. Let's take a look and let's make sure this thing is centered, so we can go over here to the panels and select a line, and then first select a line to stage, and then the line horizontal center and vertical center. And so now the background is aligned nicely to the stage. And so to bring the next image in, the effect we want is that these images are going to kind of like just bounce in. They're going to bounce in and one by one, bing, 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 bing. And so what we can do is first let's add a layer, and let's call this photo 1. And then you see here we have a blank keyframe there, but what we want is for photo 1 to appear. Let's slide down a little bit so that we've got some space here on the timeline. What we want is for photo 1 to appear 2 seconds after. Let's just say 2 seconds, or maybe 1 second after the movie starts playing. Well, what we need is some frames here to display first the background. And the way to do that is if we insert a frame here, not a keyframe. Keyframe means change on the timeline. If we just insert a frame here, we can either select insert, timeline, a frame. Then what Animate will do is fill in all the frames from 1 to 25, because it doesn't like to leave blank frames, because after all, if there are blank frames, there's nothing there. And so on the timeline, we have the option to insert layers, layer folders, frames, keyframes, which really mean change, something's changing on the timeline, and a blank frame. And the shortcut for a frame is F5, and so you want to have that. You can use your function keys as well. So on 1 second, let's just press F5, and you can see what changed about the timeline. Now we have that frame with the black donut, which means that's the starting keyframe, and now we have 25 frames. If we scrub, we can see here that we get the frame number, and it's 0.2 of a second, and then when we get to 1 second, then it's 25 frames, roughly 25, and it should actually be 24, but you know, I'm getting a little dyslexic, so it's hard to see it. So this is actually 1 second, but let's just leave it there at 25. That's fine. And now what we want to do is we want to drag photo 1 to the timeline, to its layer, should I say. So what I like to do is lock layers, so I don't change them, right? Now what we want is for photo 1 to appear after 1 second, and right now what's in on frame 25 in photo 1 is basically a blank frame, right? So if we click on that frame, we can say insert blank keyframe, because that would be the starting frame. And now we have a place where if we want to then drag and drop photo 1, then it will appear on the stage in that first frame. And so as you can see, our goal here is to just drag all these layers out, and let's separate them by roughly 1 second. And so I'm not going to do every photo, but I did want to point out that as you drag these photos out, you have the option, if you use the selection tool, to click on an image and you can drag it around on the stage. You can, via tools, go to free transform, and you can scale an object, and you can rotate it. So let's say that we want to rotate this thing out. So if we scrub, we're going to start here, and then this thing is going to appear sort of like postcards, right? And so let's repeat the same thing, and let's add photo number 2. So if I click add a layer, and we're going to name this layer photo 2. Right, we see that now we have these blank frames uh, inserted, but what we wanted to do is 1 second later we want photo 2 to appear. So what we need are some frames right here, roughly 2 seconds right down the line for this layer and this layer. And you see, notice that I click and drag and I'm selecting them both, right, by clicking and dragging. And if I press F5, then it's going to insert frames, and so the image will play, and the background layer will display for an additional second. And then what we want to do on frame 2 is insert, if we right click, at keyframe, right? We're going to insert a blank keyframe, that is, because we want to place an object there. We'd insert a keyframe if we already had an object. So we'll insert a blank keyframe, and then we'll go to the library and we'll find photo 2 and we'll drag it and just drop it down there. And let's leave it a little bit bigger, but we'll rotate it and kind of slide it over. And so now if we scrub the playhead, which is a skill that you need to master, we can see how these images would appear one by one. And so we want another second or so to go by, right? And we're going to add that third folder. So let's add, let's lock this layer for now, and let's add another layer, and we're going to call this one photo 3. And so right here we want photo 3 to appear after 3 seconds, right? So we can insert, whoops, go back here, insert a blank keyframe, and then go to the library, find photo 3, and then drag it and drop it. And let's rotate that one down too, maybe scale it down a little bit proportionally. All right, now you tell me, what's wrong? Why do we see photo 3 and this white background? Well, that's because we haven't inserted frames to display photo 2, photo 1, and the background. So we can, on the timeline, select all these frames. I don't want to drag it. And see, that sometimes happens, which could be a little bit of a mistake. But just drag it there and then press F5, and I've selected multiple frames. And now we get a better picture. If we go to this one, I can see I scaled it down a little more than I wanted, right? And I can rotate it, and it almost looks like postcards right there on the plank of the boardwalk, right? And so if I scrub back and forth, I can see all of these images. And that's just a simple frame by frame animation where these cards appear on the stage with a background running. So there's one last thing that we're going to do, and then I'll stop the demo and you can continue with the reading and learn more about Adobe Animate, and that is to work with some shapes. So when we work with the tools panel, there are a variety of tools here. What we work with so far is the selection tool. Here we have sub-select. Some of these look familiar to you, right? You can see them in other applications like Adobe Illustrator. We can scale objects. We have 3D rotation, which we'll play with. The lasso. So most of these tools are selection tools, and then down here, starting with the text tool, we have shape tools, and then drawing tools. The bone tool for animating characters, paint bucket, dropper, etc. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to, on this stage here, one of the things that we want to do is after this picture appears, about 4 seconds later, we want to have some stars appear, right? And so the stars are just going to alternately appear on the stage, one at a time. By the time you're done with this thing, it might go out to like 7 or 8 seconds, right? But let's put the first set of stars in there. So we're going to go out to 4 seconds here, and then why don't we go ahead and we're going to press F5 to insert those frames. We're going to lock the photos 3, and then let's add another layer and let's name them stars. And what we're going to do is on this layer, notice that it's filled in some blank frames, but what we want to do is right here after 4 seconds we're going to add a couple of stars. So let's, even though we have a frame there, let's go ahead and insert a blank keyframe, and then it changes, and you can see the frames are inserted, but this gray square with an open circle means that's a blank keyframe, whereas this is a keyframe that contains content. So if we scrub over there, so we're over 4 seconds, let's go ahead, and I don't want stroke, I want fill. I want the fill to be yellow. So we'll go back and we'll set that to yellow. And then we'll select the polygon tool, and then let's go to properties, and then what it's going to show us on Polystar is the stroke. The stroke is off, the fill is yellow, and we see the scaling. But let's go to options, and then what we want to do is we want to use a star, and we want the star to have 5 sides, and then let the point size be 0.5 pixels, and then click OK. And then when we go back and we draw on the stage, then what we're going to get is a nice little star with a yellow fill. And we can take that thing and we can select the scale tool and we can rotate it around, right? And so we got 1 star there, right? I should probably scale it proportionally, right? We'll scale that thing down, and then we can just forever and a day we can drag and draw some stars on the stage here, right? And that one's probably in the way of the beautiful roller coaster, but we can place the stars there, and we can have a couple of them up here and just drag them and drop them around. And what it will look like is, if we scrub, is these things will come down and the stars will appear. And if we wanted to add a few more, a few seconds later, like maybe, I'm sorry, a second later, we can go ahead and we can press F5 and go and add another layer and add more stars. For now, I think I've pretty much demonstrated what I needed to show you to get you started, and follow along in the reading, and you wouldn't have much more to do here. And then when you're done, save your work. If you have any questions, post your questions on the question forum.